Hello, welcome. Cathy or Emily or Kate, can you just give me a thumbs up if you can see what I'm sharing now? Great. Thanks very much for joining us, everyone. We're just going to make a start. Apologies, we're a minute late. We had some last-minute techie issues. But yeah, we're just going to get straight in because we've got a really full agenda, loads of exciting stuff to talk to you about today. Yeah, so welcome. This is the third in a series of inspiration sessions we're running as part of Nature Towns and Cities, all about children, nature, play and learning. It feels like a really good moment. Spring is in the air here, so the time for playing outdoors is really, well, upon us already. I'm not going to talk for long, but just to say one or two things. This topic's really close to my heart. I used to be a play worker and a youth worker, and I think it's just a really important thing for us to be thinking about, remembering children hold this unique place as sort of fully formed people and citizens, but who are partly really dependent on us to live good lives now and in the future. This is obviously especially important in urban areas where populations are very young. So the aim of today is really to give you some information, to inspire you, and really think about, we know a lot of organizations are already collaborating on this. So how can we all together build this movement, share knowledge and increase impact? So just a little bit of housekeeping. We are in the town hall format of Teams, which has been what is causing us the technical problems this morning, but hopefully it works seamlessly from now on. There is a Q&A function, so if you have questions, we're going to have plenty of time at the end for a panel discussion. So please put any questions that you do have straight into the chat, into the Q&A box that hopefully you can see there at the top of your screens. We're going to share everything afterwards, so all the slides, the recording of the session. So if you like to take notes, feel free, but if you just want to listen and engage and ask questions and think, just feel free to do that. If you need any support throughout the session, which we can't answer directly in the Q&A, there's an email address here that you can email, info@naturetownsandcities.org.uk. One of us will get back to you on that. And so just before I hand over to Cathy, just a very quick run through of what we're covering today. So welcome, that's me. I'm going to hand over to Cathy Pineo from the RSA, who's going to sort of introduce, frame everything and just really be your host for the day. Then 4 really exciting case studies from across the country before going into a panel discussion. So without much more from me, I'm going to hand over to Cathy. Thanks, Cathy.
Thanks, David. Hi, everyone. I am Cathy Pineo from Royal Society of the Arts, and I lead the Playful Green Planet program, which we deliver in partnership with Eden Project and Bath Spa University. I'd like to kind of kick off our session on a kind of fun note and ask you to kind of think of a time when you played in nature as a child. What were you doing? How did it make you feel? Just kind of the experiences that come to the front of your mind. And what we find when we ask a lot of people this question is that many people have these vivid moments of kind of freedom, joyful moments of play that was maybe a little bit risky, a little bit magical. And those moments, unfortunately, are becoming more and more rare for many children, particularly in developed countries like the UK. So I'd like to start our session today really by thinking why nature, play, and education is important, and framing it kind of around why nature, why play, why nature, and why now. So if you can just jump to the next slide, David. So in terms of why play, so play is freedom, time and space. It's really something that should be fun and uncertain and challenging, something that's flexible and non-productive. It's really not a luxury. It's how children develop and learn. It's how they explore, take risks, build relationships, and really make sense of the world around them. So David, if you can skip to the quote slide. So children, when they asked what is play, one of the ones that I love the most is really around play is what I do when everybody else has stopped telling me what to do. And another child kind of recognizes the flexibility and agency. Sometimes I make stuff, sometimes I play games, sometimes I mess about, sometimes I don't do anything at all. And if you ask grown-ups about play, those that are kind of experts in play and what it really means for children, if you can skip to the next slide, they really talk about how play is the highest form of research, and how critical play can be in terms of building kind of relationships, understanding the interdependence between yourself and others. So really, if we want our children to develop curiosity, confidence, and care, we really have to give them space to play and not just be instructed. David, if you can skip to the why green slide. So what we mean by growing up green is having the opportunity to play and learn in nature. And nature play is really when children play freely in a natural environment. They follow their own ideas while exploring and creating with natural materials. It really is the ultimate play space. It allows open-ended play, sensory play, and as I've said before, it really isn't a luxury. Being out in nature, having access to green space has real tangible benefits. It improves mental and physical health, learning and creativity. And green spaces in the UK is strongly associated with building social connection and community pride. But despite this, access to green spaces is deeply unequal. For example, 1 in 3 urban children don't regularly access green space, and people who are the most affected are often poorer and minoritized children in cities. So this really kind of underpins our passion around needing nature to be welcoming, needing it to be accessible right outside your door, because it's really not just an environmental issue, it's a social justice issue, given the benefits of nature-based play. So if you can skip to why now. We're facing what has been described as an extinction of experience of the natural world, and that's particularly true for our children. Children's connection, generation over generation, has started to collapse, and this matters because people can't care about what they don't experience and connect to. And if children grow up disconnected from nature, we can't expect them to protect it. And this has been recognized as a key contributor to the climate crisis itself. So with that in mind, we are facing quite a challenge, and there are so many wonderful initiatives that are looking at how we can work together to address this. And you'll hear about some of the different incredible work that's happening both nationally through Eden Project and National Education Nature Parks, but also on the ground in local communities. The main thing to keep in mind, though, is these initiatives are often very fragmented, so very focused on schools or communities, or focused on learning about climate change rather than kind of allowing children to experience it and play in nature, or really focused on how we improve biodiversity and our natural spaces without really considering its positive implications for community connection and child well-being. So what we really need is not more isolated projects, but connected opportunities and approaches that work in real places. So if you can just jump to the next slide. I'll talk a little about our initiative, Playful Green Planet. It's one of many that are out there and that will be discussed today. It's part of the shift to look at how we support nature-based play and really have that as a norm rather than something that occurs in isolation. If you can switch to the next slide, it's a national movement. It supports children to play in, connect with, and care for nature, especially in towns and cities where the safe and welcoming green spaces are hard to find. What makes it different is it really looks at how we support local communities to envision and co-create and transform overlooked green local spaces into the places that children can return to every day to play, to explore, and to feel a sense of belonging. And this work is really strengthened through partnerships. For example, at a national level, we work with Bar University and Forest of Imagination, which really look at bringing in creative nature play. Eden Project has so much expertise in connecting people and nature at scale. But most important to the movement is our local stewards. They are the organizations and the individuals that are working in their community to understand the challenges and opportunities and really shape what children kind of nature play experiences and spaces look like, ones that feel meaningful to them. So if you can skip to the next slide, the main kind of underpinning of Playful Green Planet and the movement that we're advocating for is aligned to these principles. We're really looking at how we support these spaces to be open and accessible to all children, how we support co-creation in place, and our stewards are so critical in that role. Keeping a kind of eye on the triple benefits. So how are we growing children's ecological citizenship, community connection, and nature regeneration of place all at once? And really important to me is also how is this embedded in the community and evolving to deliver impact for the long term? We want these spaces to be things children grow up with, that return to year after year, that really feel like it's their place. They feel a sense of ownership and belonging to these places. So if you can just skip to the next slide. Playful Green Planet was lucky enough to receive some funding from the National Lottery to pilot the approach in Dundee and in Hull. And these stewards will be talking to you about their experiences. But we've also taken the learning of this pilot and created a Playful Green Planet network that's really open to any organization interested in doing similar work. At the moment, we have 7 additional stewards working across the UK. And really the idea is that this is a decentralized movement that works for communities on the ground. If you can skip to the last slide. So just to say to date, in about a year, we've managed to reach 3,000 children, unlock about 14,000 hours of additional nature-based play in these communities, and secure 89 partnerships. And while these numbers are great, what we're really excited about is the impact on the ground, how it's shifted behaviors, how children have gained confidence, how they've gained new friendships. And that will be something that our stewards can talk to you about later today. So with that in mind, I am going to hand over to Emma to talk through some of the initiatives that are happening at Eden Project.
Thanks, Cathy. Hi, everyone. I'm Emma Tolley, Outreach Projects Manager at the Eden Project. Next slide, please. So for those of you that don't know Eden's story, this is the Eden Project a little over 25 years ago. We've just celebrated our 25th birthday just last week. And over the last 25 years, this rather depleted china clay pit has been transformed into a global garden with a living collection of plants from around the world. And we know that regeneration isn't just about transforming a place. As one grandparent told me when I started working at Eden Project, Eden helped to put this part of Cornwall back on the map. And with new projects growing in Morecambe, we're hoping that the Eden effect can be felt in other locations. So we're just going to watch a little clip of this pit turning into a paradise. If you could hit the play button there, David, that would be fantastic. And there it goes, from pit to paradise. So it sounds like an oversimplification, but what makes a green space green are the plants. And the Eden Project has always been a stage for these plants. It's a place where people can get close to them and develop a connection to the natural world. And by that close relationship with the natural world, what we hope they're going to do is then take the steps to support and nurture nature as well, and look after their planet. And thanks to its biophilic design and also the skills and care of our horticulturalists, this site has welcomed 25 million visitors. And the plants that grow here tell us a lot about the adaptation and resilience, which we're always going to need for as we adapt to a kind of changing climate in the future. And so my role is very much about enabling our youngest visitors to develop a relationship to the natural world to support their health, well-being, learning and development. Next slide, please, David. And this connection is really important for children at the moment because there are a number of challenges that they are facing. So we know that there are issues with mental health in children and young people, that there are concerns about obesity, children's levels of inactivity, and also reception teachers are concerned about children's school readiness. Do they have the basic independence and language skills to be able to make the best possible start in school? Next slide, please, David. And we think that nature-based play offers some of the solutions to these challenges. So very simply, if you want to get children more physically active, let them play outdoors. But there is a little, a kind of subtle difference between outdoor play and nature-based play, where you're using the natural elements, the plants, the landscape, to give play a kind of more organic quality. And it's the exploring of this wonky world that actually has additional physical benefits. So better balance and coordination, enhanced immunity. And when the world is a little bit wonky, we're also having to manage a bit of risk to keep ourselves safe in these spaces. And that can lead to greater self-confidence, independence and resilience. There's also lots of cognitive benefits from being in nature, from improved focus and concentration. When children play outdoors, they tend to play more when they play in nature, they tend to play more cooperatively, more collaboratively, and they use more words. And that and the kind of mental jumps that you have to do when you're using natural resources as your play prop. So when your stick becomes your wand, or the key to unlock a dungeon, or your boggart's bridge, that's building that kind of symbolic play where you're imagining something as something else is really good for boosting our creativity. And of course, you're getting these really rich and visceral experiences, which the poet Ted Hughes, he described those kind of childhood experiences when he was young, of capturing mice in his hands, in his coat pockets, in the fields behind his house. He wanted to then be able to develop his poetry so he could describe the mousiness of these mice to other people. Similarly, Bridget Riley talks about swimming through a diamond when she was on holiday in Cornwall and wanting to be able to communicate that kind of interplay of light and water on her canvas. So we might be giving these children and young people these real catalysts that are going to give them the desire and wants to be able to communicate nature to other people as well. Next slide, please. And also children want this, and they know that they want it too. So the Children's People in Nature survey asked over 4,000 children, and 91% of children agree that being in nature makes them happy. 86% of children want that opportunity to do more to look after their environment, to develop this really reciprocal relationship with nature. Next slide, please. So at Eden Project, right from the kind of earliest moments, we're trying to enable children to be able to grow their relationship with nature. A Royal Foundation study found that 70% of people still do not understand the significance of the early years in terms of child development, and indeed how it informs our development into adulthood. It's worth knowing that 90% of the neural pathways in the brain are formed before age 5, 70% are formed before age 3, and actually those first critical 1,001 days of a child's life between conception and about at the age 2, where almost all of the kind of foundations and for our attributes towards health, well-being, learning are created. So this is a really, really key stage to be enabling children to develop not just a relationship with their peers and with their caregivers, but also with nature. And every early years practitioner knows that what forms the brain in these really crucial moments are those positive experiences, those positive relationships. So our activities are all about that. They're about how do we give very young children positive experience of being out in nature. How do we to support our caregivers to give them more opportunities to do this kind of activity? So we work with children, with babies from as young as 12 weeks old. Very simply, they might come to one of our yoga bud sessions in the beautiful med biome. So that's just about gentle physical activity with your baby in a beautiful green space. And we're always working with our parents, with our caregivers. We're always supporting them in that role. We're always nurturing that relationship between caregiver and baby, and then also with the natural world. So after 12 weeks, you might move on to one of our music sessions where we're thinking about how we're using nature words in our songs, how we're using the music and singing about nature, the movement in those spaces to connect with the plants that we can see in their stories as well. And it's really important to realise that we've actually adapted kind of different activities for different parts of the garden and estate. So there are some places like in our biomes and our more formal gardens where we have to really lean into this idea of active looking. We're kind of using that's how we're engaging children actively with the spaces that they're in. And we've developed lots of tools and ways of doing this. And then we've got other sessions like Little Eden, which you can access from about 2 years old, where we're out on the outer estate, where we have the opportunity to be able to sort of sustainably and responsibly gather our resources, where the children can play a very active role in participating, but also nurturing that space as well. And we also run a number of CPD courses where we're working with other practitioners to be able to share our learning of this work. It's also worth saying that the kind of key principles of this work, so this kind of emotional connection to being in nature, and understanding and knowledge of the natural world, the skills that we need to use to care for it are threaded through all of our programs. So you get them in our schools programs as children are in education, right up to HE. You'll find them in our seasonal activities that we run for parents, in our campaigns around the big lunch. There's always been a huge element of understanding nature-based play in there, and in our nature connections activities, where we're looking at kind of how we develop this connection to the natural world all the way from 0 through to 90. And as I said, we share the learnings with other practitioners. So in various trainings. So we work with early years providers, we work with school teachers. We also support other places in how they can design their places or adapt their places and spaces to offer more of these opportunities to the people in them. Thank you. Next slide, please. So these are some of our key principles, but we're going to skip on to the next slide, please, David. And why is it so important that we have access to these spaces, and why and that element of design which enables children to be in them is because our environment really does shape us. So this is an image from Tim Gill's urban playground. Apparently this is genuinely a real playground in a new urban development. Next slide, please, David. And we know that it's the biodiversity in these spaces which gives them the variety, which supports that kind of nature-based play. It means that they change from season to season, they change with the elements. And that's really important, that we're providing this variety of experiences. So we understand that play is often sometimes messy as well. And that can come with some concerns from in terms of how we make sure that the recreational impact in these spaces enables both nature and children to thrive. But we think one of the things that we need is actually more of the green stuff, so that there are these spaces that can welcome children into them. And I question whether kind of our planning, our landscape designers are really thinking about these children, particularly these young children, and the play opportunities in green spaces. Do we think about where there are places that babies and toddlers and children can get out of the pram, out of the buggy, where they can be on the ground? Do we think about the sight lines? Do we think about whether they're good enough for the father of twins who needs to look after children going in 2 different directions? Do we think about the bench which has the backrest and the armrest to support the breastfeeding mother? Do we think about the boundaries between our green spaces and the roads, so that if we have a parent or a grandparent with mobility issues, they know that if their child runs, they have the opportunities to get to them? All of these really key things which will enable children to be in our spaces more. And I think you're going to hear about some of the ways at which these spaces are being made accessible to children and young people in the next presentation. So I'm going to hand over, I think it's to Izzy next. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Emma. Yes, I'm going to be talking to you about Playful Green Hull. I'm going to be as fast as I possibly can because I've got quite a bit to get through in a short space of time. So my name's Dr. Isabel Reagan, Izzy for short, and I am a lecturer in early childhood and education at the University of Hull. And we are in the very fortunate position to own a green space, and we are in the process of transforming that into one of the community spaces as part of the Playful Green Planet project. Can I have the next slide, please, David? So I'm just going to give you a bit of a flavour of the context in which we're working. I'm sure all of you have got some connotations in mind when you hear about Hull. So 52.4% of children who are living in Hull currently experience income deprivation. And this statistic is something that we can see is increasing year by year. Over a third of those children are eligible for free school meals, which is significantly higher than the UK average, which sits at about a quarter of children being eligible for free school meals. Free school meals is something that in education we use as a key indicator of child poverty. Bearing these statistics in mind, a recent report suggests that 18% of children who attend schools who do have a high percentage of free school meals are given daily opportunities to experience nature. And this is a contrast to 52% of pupils who attend a setting who have a low percentage of free school meals. So what this indicates to us is that actually children in Hull are experiencing a much more intense version of the nature deficit disorder that I'll talk about on the next slide. Hull's also a densely populated city. It's got very tight urban grain and poor public transport connections. So what this means is that children in Hull don't have those opportunities to get out to those woodlands, those more wild natural spaces. And so a lot of what we see is that the green spaces that do exist tend to be things like playing fields, very monoculture, and not a lot of opportunity to experience that nature play that we associate with more wild landscapes. I also have put this in here about something that I've come across, which is referred to as plant blindness. And what that research evidence suggests is that children who do live in highly urbanized environments, such as Hull, exhibit lower awareness of the variety of plant life. They don't have the knowledge about plant life in terms of what lives there, what it could be used for, foraging, things like that, and respect for plant life. And when I say respect, I don't mean that in a, I'm not judging those children. But basically what it means is that there's not that awareness of plants as living things. There's not that awareness of the environment as something that we should care for, which I think both Cathy and Emma have talked about at length in their presentations. But what I'm trying to paint for you here is the picture in Hull in terms of the children that we're working with, the communities that we're working with, and the strong need that there is for for this nature play and the project that we're working on. Next slide, please, David. Oh, the tickle. So at Playful Green Hull, our vision is that we will be rewilding. And when I say rewilding, I don't mean in the sense of increasing the biodiversity in any extreme way, although that would be something that we'd be looking at as a long-term goal. But the university owned the Botanic Gardens, which is a great privilege for us because we can use this site, and it's a very inclusive site because we can make sure it's secure for children. And in terms of facilities, it's really well managed. However, before we came in as Playful Green Planet, it was privately managed by the university and it was completely inaccessible to the public. So what we are aiming to do and what we have done is to transform the Botanic Gardens into a community green space, which meets the needs of children and nature in our local community. And our aim is to do this by cultivating playful interactions in the space in the Botanic Gardens. We draw heavily on our team's wealth of knowledge and experience of both arts-based interventions. So we tend to use creative practices and the forest school approach. We're all trained as forest school leaders, and we do provide training opportunities for our students and for teachers in the local community as well. We also facilitate co-design opportunities between children and community members, with the aim of benefiting the well-being of all who share the space. So that's the plants, animals, and people who exist within the local community. Next slide, please, David. Thank you. So how do we do this? How do we come together and create community? What we've done is to build up existing networks. So there are different community organisations who work throughout the city, and what we've done is to create a co-design council, which we perceive as consisting of wise elders from across the whole community who are working within this space, whether that's education, the arts, or nature-based play and nature connection. And they have been able to offer us advice, guidance, and support, and connections. So that has been hugely beneficial. We've also nurtured new connections. So we want to make sure that our space can provide opportunities for nature engagement for children from all backgrounds and abilities in our local community. What we've been able to do with this in mind is adopt quite a flexible approach, and this has supported us to be able to bring new stakeholders onto the site. Different community groups are able to use the site for their purposes, and this has helped us to build up a really large community and reach children in different ways. We also think of ourselves as setting the scene. So we're extending our work with children through providing resources and toolkits for teachers, as I'll talk about in later slides, and practitioners who work in early childhood settings. And we also provide training and CPD opportunities for practitioners across the city, as well as training all of our students in forest school approach, so that they can go on and take that practice out into their schools and settings. Next slide, please. So something that we like to think about is how we support children and families to become Indigenous. What does this mean? So we want children to have a sense of belonging to their local community, to their green spaces that they have access to. And we don't want them to see nature as something other, something apart from. We want them to feel part of nature. So what we do, all of our activities that we organise, all of our training that we provide is constructed around paying attention to those natural rhythms. There are so many rhythms in nature that we can pay attention to. There are seasons, there are daylight hours which change throughout the year. There are migrations, there are different creatures coming in depending on the time of year and leaving. Can we pay attention to that with children? How do we do that? Paying attention to flora and fauna. So identification is something that we work a lot with, supporting children to understand what is in their natural environment and how that changes across the year. Tide times are obviously another natural rhythm which we don't necessarily get to experience in the Botanic Gardens, but are an important part of life in Hull because we live on an estuary. Gestations, so those times of year, particularly at this time of year, we're thinking about spring, all of the different baby animals that are being born. All of these different natural rhythms offer new opportunities to connect to the present environment. Practical ideas. We can create nature trails with children, which is something that we've done in the Botanic Gardens. We can bird watch, we can use our binoculars, we can use equipment like that. Creating habitats for small creatures. Seasonal crafts are something we work with a lot. Our arts-based approach is really important to our work. And hosting events, so we host regular events to mark equinoxes and solstices across the year. Stories and folklore is another way that we try and support children to become Indigenous. So that involves retelling and reframing old narratives and also myth making tied to the local landscape. So some ideas that we have around this that we use are creating tree spirits with clay, and giving them a personality, or thinking about the particular species of tree that we're working with and how we could represent this through clay. Small world play, so we have different creatures and fairies available, and children can go and create little habitats or areas with that, and interact with the natural environment that way. Crafting stories around distinguishing features we might see in the local environment. So one of the trees, the children have created this character of an octopus because it's got huge branches that reach very low down across the space. Map making, so thinking about what the different areas represent in the space. Story circles, collaborative storytelling, and we host a lot of workshops with local theatre groups. and musicians to really integrate that storytelling within the local landscape. Another thing that we like to think about is nurturing reciprocity and challenging dominance. So how can we reframe that hierarchical, transactional relationship we often have with the natural world? So we're not looking to tell children that they are necessarily here to receive something from the natural environment, although that is one of our aims through the project. It's more about supporting them to interact with nature in respectful ways. So we do that through things like bug hunting and study, and talking about, how we can be respectful and careful with that insect life while still becoming close to it. Shelter building is something we do a lot. So thinking about how we can create natural shelters that don't sort of harm the environment, but still provide us with that shelter from different weather conditions. Spontaneous risky play is something that we think about a lot. How can we support children to risk assess for themselves and explore whilst remaining safe? Sensory experiences with mud. I mean, that literally, we've got a lot of mud. Everybody has got a lot of mud. You can do that in any environment. Water play, playing with different leaves that we might find, or different like conkers, seed pods. And then wild clay with local ceramicists is something we're currently working on. So literally foraging clay and using that in our more arts-based activities. Next slide, please. So how can we slow down and notice the children? So something we're always thinking about is how can we literally support that nature connection, because sometimes it's not enough just to say, go and have free play, go and enjoy the environment and be creative. A lot of the time when children aren't used to being given that kind of unstructured prompt, they really struggle to slow down. And something that we're always thinking about is time and our concept of time, like I was talking about in terms of nature having different rhythms of time to what we might expect in a classroom environment, which is where children are, spending a lot of their time. So we always try and use like a slow approach, and I really like Alison Clark's work on this as an antidote to increasingly hurried childhoods, supporting children to adjust to a more mindful attitude towards time and to help to foster that nature connection by slowing down and noticing. And there is also evidence to suggest that this is really beneficial for children's well-being. So what we have now created is an intervention through nature journaling. So what this represents is a mindful and creative approach to spending time in nature. It involves careful recording of observations of the environment, and children can use words, pictures, and numbers in a journal or a sketchbook. We've provided each child within our community with their own nature journal, and what we are doing, what we're bringing in is some quite focused activities that in the beginning are quite structured to support children to be able to go off and to use these nature journals for themselves. We've designed a research intervention which we will be putting into practice next month, which involves 60 local primary school children, and they're year 2 children, so they're aged around 6 to 7, each to be supplied with a journal and also art materials kits, and they will attend a full day of nature journaling workshops at our site with us, so hosted by us, and the workshops will be run by us. Children and teachers will then be supported to add to their journals regularly across the summer term before we then have a final co-design event, which includes focus groups with the children, an exhibition of their work and presentations of their work. And we'll then investigate what the impact is of this intervention on well-being and nature connectedness. Next slide, please. So in terms of what we've got planned next, we are planning the nature journaling research project that commences on the 26th of April and will extend across the summer term. We've also got the spring equinox event, which is taking place at the end of the month too. So that's a community event which is designed to connect local families and community members to the change in season through seasonal nature, craft and co-design opportunities. And we've got a lovely co-design intervention planned around a fairy post box and sending a letter to the fairy about what they want our space to be providing for them. We do a lot of work with fairies at Playful Green Hull, and we also have a maternal mental health day picnic planned. So that involves very young babies and new mothers coming to the site to enjoy some wellbeing sessions, nature sensory play for the children, and some outdoor cooking and eating as part of the picnic side of things. Next slide, please. So I've got some references here for any kind of statistics that I've cited, and Alison Clark's work is there. And I've also put in some recommended reading as well, which kind of there's variation of different things. There's some really practical examples, and then also some more research-based examples. And braiding sweetgrass, I just absolutely adore and recommend to everybody, because it's a very sort of spiritual, and it really changes your whole concept of nature connection and what that means. Hopefully I've given you a very quick overview of the project and the work that we're doing, and thank you for listening. I'm really looking forward to hearing the rest of the ideas and having our panel talk at the end as well. Thank you. I'm passing over to Danni. Sorry, I'm passing over to Danni from Dundee next.
Hi there, my name is Danni Dawn and I'm Youth Development Worker at the MAXwell Centre. We are a community centre and a community garden in the Hilltown area of Dundee. We are also a charity. I've worked for the MAXwell Centre for almost 12 years. I was straight from uni, I studied food and nutrition and just got really into gardening. The area we work is an area of quite high deprivation. There's high levels of poverty, food poverty, mental health issues, substance misuse, a lack of access to green spaces, especially green spaces, safe green spaces for our young people. So the MAXwell Centre provides sort of a safe, inclusive place with huge benefits. There's so much I could talk about the MAXwell Centre, but I don't have that much time, so please check out our website. If you could go to the next slide. So connecting children with nature, we have an amazing community garden. We work with our local schools and nurseries. We also have after school clubs, and we have clubs during all of the school holidays except Christmas. All our activities are completely free of charge and we are open all year round. It's an all year round experience from planting a seed to harvesting, and the young people cook what they've harvested as well. So it really is a joy to see and such a good learning experience. There's no barriers to participate in. Like I said, they're all free of charge. The only issue we have is our waiting lists are very, very long. We find that when young people join, if they came with nursery, they join our after school clubs in primary one, and then they just don't leave. So that's a bonus for us, but yeah, capacity is a bit of an issue. When young people are in the garden, they explore the garden, they look for bugs, they build dens. We have a real focus on free play. We always say that anytime we make a plan, it never goes to plan. So we learn to pivot and just let the kids lead the way. They know what they want to do. So we get a lot of our after school club kids who have been thinking about what they want to do at school, which they probably shouldn't be, but they have a plan for when they come to the garden. And it's also amazing because we work with so many different schools, we get kids that come together who might have never met each other before, and the garden is the perfect place to build friendships. When we do our evaluations of our clubs, we find the thing that pops up the most is the kids just enjoy being together outside and playing. There's no, yeah, it seems so simple, I think, but that is the most important thing to them. Next slide, please. So the MAXwell way. Like I said, we just let curiosity lead. The young people shape everything that we do. They lead the way. Seeing them connect with nature in so many different ways is just beautiful, whether it's digging out tatties from the ground with their hands or eating a pea straight from a pod. It's a real hands-on experience. And I think it's the best way they learn about the world around them. And learning about themselves too, we find that is a big thing that comes up. They sort of discover who they are, their likes, their talents, and they can express themselves in the garden. Lots of creativity, as well as gardening and cooking, building. I think the possibilities are kind of endless in the MAXwell garden. Next slide, please. So our work with Playful Green Planet has been an amazing opportunity for us. This is our little dream team in the picture there. It's myself, Manuela, who's our garden coordinator. We have Suzanne Scott, who's an amazing artist, Whimsical Lush, check her out too, and Rodney Mountain. So through Playful Green Planet and Suzanne and Rodney, we have developed with our young people, they co-designed a toadstool trail around our beautiful garden. All around the garden, there's lots of toadstools dotted around, and Suzanne has designed a beautiful map that you could see online as well. And the kids go around and each toadstool has a little prompt, whether it's tell a story, listen to the frogs in the pond. And it's just a really fun way for the kids to connect with nature. Like what Izzy was saying, sometimes they do need a little bit of a prompt if they're not used to, you know, just go, be free, do your thing. So the Toadstool Trail has really opened up so much opportunities for our young people. And of course, they co-designed it. So it's lots of their favourite spots in the garden. It's how they use the garden. We have like a story stone corner and a wise old fig tree that one of our young people, she was doing like advice sessions under the wise old fig tree. So it's just been just a fantastic journey so far, and there's so much more coming from it every day, pretty much. We've also hosted events through Playful Green Planet. So we've did fairy garden designs. Again, fairies are always super popular and magical. We have hosted a strawberry party, a pizza party. We did a freaky fungi festival. We also did a play parade around the hill town. So there was lots of people dressed up as vegetables and bugs and sort of pulling people in to join this little parade down the hill town. And it was just an awesome day. It was so much fun. We've also facilitated some teacher training sessions. So teachers got the opportunity to come into the garden without any children. So they could become the children and they could enjoy the garden the way that the kids do. So just playing, seeing, feeling, bringing back childhood memories. It was a really, really good session. We also did one on planning their perfect playground. If there was no such thing as red tape and budget issues and time constraints, we do work a lot in the local schools too, like planting in their playgrounds. And the big issue that comes up all the time is time. So we like to support our local schools with their playground planting and outdoor play. So it was great to get the teachers in and just hear from them what's happening on the ground. We have also developed a junior journalist project. So we have a MAXwell Youth Council, which is our older young people, teenagers. We found that in the garden, at the after school clubs, we kind of lost them a little bit when they went to high school. Their priorities changed, their, you know, things change in life. So we were like, what can we do to keep them coming to the MAXwell Centre? So a few years ago, I developed a MAXwell Youth Council. So they have become youth volunteers. They go to board meetings, they attend our AGM, they come to different events. And it's just hearing from them what they want the MAXwell Centre to be. And, you know, their voice is what shapes everything. And it is so important to us to give them that voice. So our junior journalist project, I went on a tangent there. It's been giving them a camera to see the garden through their eyes, developing video ideas of what they find important. If you do get a chance, check out our Substack. It's Playful Green Dundee. The junior journalist's latest video is on there. It's called David at Anborough, which says it all. But it was such a fun process, and they did something that I don't think any of us could do. It's very much their work, and it's really funny, and it's so much fun. Next slide, please. So some of the benefits we notice in the garden, I've kind of said a few things already. We notice anxiety just reduces. Something happens when, you know, young people walk through the garden gate. It's almost like their shoulders drop and they're just really chilled. And of course, when your anxiety reduces, your confidence grows in the garden. They try new things. They, eat kale straight from the plant. It just is, yeah, it's great for their confidence and just having the freedom to be themselves, like I've already said. And then again, if your confidence grows, friendships form. We find that sort of outdoor play just removes so many different barriers. And we find that a lot of the kids that wouldn't normally mix together do mix together. And we have lots of groups of friendships who have formed through just being in the garden and playing. And with all these things, resilience develops. We always tell the kids, we're going to plant seeds. They might not work. That's okay. Just keep going, adapt, and don't give up. And that's pretty much what they do. They just keep going. They keep coming back. They keep trying. And I think that's so important for their resilience, their development for the future. Next slide, please. What I've learned the most working at the MAXwell Centre is the power of listening. I think it's so important to listen to what young people want. They will tell you what they want, they will tell you what they need, and that's the best way to support them in their life. The garden is the perfect place to listen. I mean, listen to the birds, like what Izzy was saying about slowing down, listen to the birds, watch the frogs in the pond. I've found a lot of times doing weeding, all the kids have plots that they work on, and just doing a bit of weeding and just chatting is just so valuable. There's no pressure, there's no stress, you don't have to do these things. It's just listening to the young people. And at the MAXwell Centre, the young people do literally shape everything we do. It's their ideas. We are just glorified facilitators for what they want to do. They have a plan and we're like, yeah, let's do it. Let's go for it. So I suppose it's just don't overthink outdoor play, follow their leads. And on that note, thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions, because that was like a speed run of the MAXwell Centre and the work we do, please put any messages in the chat. That's the same for any other speakers, and we will get back to you. Thank you. Oh, next is Richard and Giuliana.
Brilliant. Thanks, Danny. My name is Richard Irvine. I am the Senior Programme Officer for the Education Nature Park in the southwest of England. And I'm joined by Giuliana, who's a colleague from the Natural History Museum, who works in the community science team, and we're going to split this presentation. So I'll do the first bit, and then you'll hear from Giuliana shortly. I think the National Education Nature Park is fairly well known now, but if anyone hasn't come across us before, we really came out of the Department for Education, Climate Change and Sustainability Strategy a few years ago. We're funded by the Department for Education, and the programme is a partnership that's led by the Natural History Museum with the RHS, Learning Through Landscapes, and lots of other partners as well, who you will see at the end. And it's a multifaceted programme, but in a nutshell, it's really about putting climate and nature at the heart of education. And our focus is most often on enhancing biodiversity in school grounds. So if we can have a look at the next slide and consider what those school grounds are like. If you imagine school, most of us went to school, and might have a stereotypical idea of what the school grounds looks like. When I ask this question, people usually say the word tarmac. And it's true that 45% of our school grounds are what we would call ground without plants, if we're thinking in habitat terms. A lot of the green space in school grounds tends to be sports pitches, which are fairly monocultural, close cut, and not fantastic for wildlife. And we do have other elements there. which are lots of different sorts of habitats. And if we think about the scale of these school grounds, if we look at the whole school estate in England, we're looking at an area that is about twice the size of Birmingham. So there's a significant patchwork mosaic of schools across the country, which has got a really significant potential to increase biodiversity and increase young people's contact with nature. So if we move on, please. So this is really what we're about. And if you click again, David, please. Sorry, I forgot there was an animation. The overarching goal of the Nature Park has got sort of three real elements to it. There's an emotional element, which is really about developing connection through meaningful contact. So it's about doing something purposeful that has a meaning to the children who take part. There's also a cognitive element, so it's about learning about climate change, learning about nature and the causes of the crises that we're in. And that's supported by a huge range of learning resources, which are on the Nature Park website. So they are quality assured and they're curriculum aligned, but they're not a curriculum as such. It's a very much build your own adventure approach so that teachers can use their own creativity and fit things where need be into their own curriculum. And then finally, and I think most importantly, there is an element to do with agency and making change so that young people feel able to take action and able to take action in a place where they spend a lot of time, which is school, with the support of the adults who are around them at school. Next slide, please. So hopefully we're creating this network and you can see all the little green dots appearing. And those are schools that have mapped their boundaries and are starting to map the habitats on their sites. And we're really starting simply. So we could get into the great complexities of conservation land management, but essentially we start talking about turning grey spaces into green ones or blue ones and making that change. And that might be something as simple as a planter on a piece of tarmac at the edge of a play space. We're not talking about digging it all up because it serves, as we've heard, really important purpose for play and for physical education as well. At the minute, these are numbers from yesterday. We have 9,276 schools and settings registered. So that's nearly 20% of the total in England. And together they have mapped 22 million meters squared of habitat, which is building that picture, the sort of baseline picture of what lives and grows in that huge land area that's occupied by 9 million children on a daily basis. So if we're thinking about potential for change and potential for action, that's a huge population in a huge area. Next slide, please. So I wanted to give you a little example that related to nature towns and cities. We've been working in Exeter, who are sort of starting on the journey of their accreditation process. My colleague Ella sits on the steering group and she looks after consultation with young people in school. And one of the ways that she's doing that is through visiting a sample of schools in Exeter and running vision statement workshops. And writing vision statements for school grounds and for wildlife in school grounds is a really popular nature park activity. That's often a good starting point for engagement with the programme. We're starting from a pretty good baseline already. We've got 29 out of the 57 schools within the Exeter City Council postcode area already registered. And we would like, our aspiration is for an education nature park city, if you like, in Exeter Nature City, where we have all of those schools having mapped their habitats and all of them taking action to increase the green infrastructure of the city of Exeter and link it up with all those other green spaces. Other things we've done locally there are work with multi-academy trusts and the Ted Rag Trust in particular. We've attended several events where we're supporting their sustainability leads in climate action planning. It's particularly on the biodiversity pillar and about using nature as a way to solve other problems across the other pillars that are addressed in climate action plans. We've had a small grants program last year, and 2 schools which were eligible because of their lack of access to local nature and their high indices of multiple deprivation. In Whipton Barton will be starting projects. The schools are adjacent and they share grounds, but they are doing separate projects to revive areas that are pretty neglected, really, and increase nature contact for the young people who go to school. And quite a nice little addition is that we're collaborating with Anna Harrison, who's based at Killerton House and who's a National Trust Nature Engagement Officer. So there's a nice partnership happening in Exeter. If we can move on, just to show you an example of the sort of things that we're talking about. This is up the M5 a little bit in Bridgewater in Somerset at Chiltern Trinity School, which is quite a complicated site to work on because it was a PFI new school build. So the school itself didn't really have any control over the grounds, but this small area was part of the old school that wasn't demolished, and the school could do what they wanted here. But unfortunately, this bit of playground floods for 2 or 3 months of the year and was a bit slippery, dangerous, unusable during playtime. And the Eco Council, who you can just see in the picture at the bottom there, decided they would like to create a pollinator larder. And this sort of really nice nature-based solution to the flooding problem involved breaking up the tarmac, adding layers of substrate, planting lots of pollinator-friendly plants, and putting in a big planter there you can see, which has a bench around it, where those young people like to spend time just having a relaxing time looking at those plants and the insects that visit them. So that's the sort of grey to green intervention that is possible. So if we can go on to the next slide, please, and hand over to Giuliana.
Thanks, Richard. So a big part of the nature park is this community science, which is the same as citizen science. And it's the idea of young people collaborating with scientists to really drive scientific discovery. And some of the examples of what this actually looks like on the ground are these. So the going outside and the mapping of habitats, the discovery of the wildlife that is around your site, the counting of, say, pollinators in a structured survey. This is all about understanding what's there right now, and then from that baseline being able to track the difference that young people are making as those wonderful habitat enhancements that Richard described are happening. And if we click through just very briefly, there's many benefits of community science, and I'll just touch on 2. One being that compared to professional scientists, the action on the ground, the time it takes from the data being collected and the action actually happening is very different, and the scale is very different too. So instead of it being national, international sort of influencing of policies, the action is happening at a much more local level, at Exeter city level, for example, or a neighbourhood or a school site. And the time that it takes, instead of it taking, as this paper demonstrated, it takes many years, often decades, actually, when you're collecting data, you're discovering a place, and you're doing it in a place-based approach, it creates a forum for discussion that as you're engaging, connecting with nature, collecting data about it, the action actually happens within months instead of it being decades. And for learners themselves, the real benefit is kind of the inquiry-based approach. So being able to take what they're learning in a classroom, in their lessons, outside and applying it and working out how to solve the problems that the young people really care about in the places that they're in every day. And if we click through, you can really use community science to make a difference. So, for example, you can, yes, there's lots of satellite data, there's lots of professional collected data from many different schemes, but using schools to fill in the holes in the map and linking the schools sort of outside this project or a particular school site with the wider schemes. So such as the local nature recovery strategies, for example. There's a little map there of the Tolley area. And you've got those green areas are the schools. And then the other coloured dots are the local nature recovery strategy and also a beeline, like a pollinator beeline. And the schools have such a fantastic opportunity to, for example, increase the wildflowers on their site and contribute to these much bigger schemes and be part of the bigger picture. And as Richard mentioned, it doesn't need to be huge, drastic changes. It can be just as simple as this school's entrance, which was very grey, and they decided to not dig up the tarmac for whatever potential financial reason or others, but they just added some wood chip, some flowers in a pot, and that just makes such a difference to the wildlife and the pollinators that can use the space, but not just nature, but all the young people that come in and out and are able to gain all the well-being benefits of seeing those spaces and connecting with nature in those spaces. And just to click through again, give you a couple of practical examples. So we had one school that decided to take a corner of their lawn and do the no-mow May, so let the grass grow long for 1 month. And they counted the number of species before and after, and they had 3 times the amount of species. Just a really practical way of taking their lessons outdoors, connecting to nature, and really seeing the difference that their actions make. And another is using, for example, one of our biodiversity surveys is the pollinator count. And if you, for example, took an area that you might have a wild patch, an area of a flower garden, and in between you might just have a lawn, doing the pollinator count survey across those 3 areas, comparing the sorts of pollinators that you have, and then thinking about how you might be able to link them, what kind of flowers you might be able to plant, to then create a pollinator corridor, however short it is, in whatever space you have. This is about young people really using this evidence themselves, leading the surveys themselves, and making changes and demonstrating the impact. So clicking through again, just to conclude, such fantastic talks we've heard today. And I'm just so inspired by all your knowledge and how well articulated you all spoke about the spending time outdoors. And I just really wanted to highlight how all these different projects, all these different ideas are not mutually exclusive. They really work together. And spending that time outdoors from the point of view of the community science, this is where you can really use the time that you spend outdoors to channel it into action for nature. And we're all about empowering the young people to feel like they're agents of change, going outside, working out what's there, deciding, using the results of their surveys to make these evidence-informed decisions, making the change, and then seeing it all happen in front of their eyes. Thank you all very much. And there's our email at the end, I believe, David, yeah, there you go, if anybody wants to get in touch. Thank you all very much. I think I'm handing over to David.
Cathy, yes. Thank you so
sorry,
much.
Handing over to Cathy.
No problem. Thank you so much to all of our speakers. It's so incredible to hear all the work that's happening in the different spaces. We'll now have a bit of a panel discussion. There have been some questions that were submitted before this event and some questions during this event. Please feel free to continue to submit questions through the Q&A function. For now, I'm going to start us out with a really interesting one, which is, isn't schools the answer? And I'm going to ask Emma to tackle that. So both in terms of the importance of schools to be driving this kind of nature connection and play, but also what's needed beyond that.
Hi there, Cathy. Yeah, thank you. So I think, yes, schools are part of the answer, but I don't think they're entirely the answer as well. So children do spend an awful lot of time in school settings, and I'm sure you're aware that there's been some kind of discussion about how children's break times and play times are being squeezed. that they're spending less time outdoors during their school day, that learning is becoming, in some instances, a lot more classroom based, and curriculums are really full. So actually, what I do think we need to be a little bit careful about is our teachers are doing an awful lot of work in terms of having not only to get through these very dense curriculums, to be moving children on academically, to be safeguarding their welfare. There's so many things already that teachers are doing that what we can't do is just add them another thing that is their responsibility to do. So absolutely, let's look at the places and spaces where children can be outside during the day. Let's make sure that school practitioners do feel confident to take their lessons outside, that they do understand the value and importance of that. Let's bring the nature to where the children are, which is in the school grounds, which I think is what the National Education Nature Park is doing as well. Let's make sure that that during those playtimes, children can access really beautiful biodiverse environments on their doorstep. And of course, that's going to have other benefits as well, because those places are likely to be cooler, flood resistance, offer all that kind of climate support. So yes, there is some work with schools to be done, but I think we also have to think about the time that children are are outside of schools, because that is also a significant part. We want to work with those families and those communities, and the work that I kind of touched on that we're doing with early years is about building that relationship to nature, with a parent and child together from the outset, so that you have more of a family culture around that. So then, as our children are walking to school, I'm also very aware as a working parent myself that there is actually that family time as well is quite squeezed. So actually, are we supporting parents in their communities? Are we making these spaces really accessible and easy? Is our walk to school an opportunity for some nature connection? Have we got time to do that, or are we just shuttling our children from place to place? And I think yes, definitely schools are part of the answer, but I think we also need these spaces in our communities. Thanks, Cathy.
Thanks so much, Emma. For the next one, how can we get nature-based play embedded into regular activities that families choose to do in their own time, rather than children always or only experiencing nature-based play as part of their school or other organized sessions? So I'm going to hand over to our stewards for that one, to talk a little about how they've looked at the activities that they already run with families and have made those kind of more accessible for nature-based play. Danni, can I ask you to launch us off?
Sure. Working with families, I think for us, we use our local park quite a lot. We find that, we could catch people as they're going past. The MAXwell Centre is very much walled in. You would know, Cathy, because you've been there. But I think just being out and about, especially in the park, it just attracts people. For us, we've been working really hard to improve our local park. So I think there maybe is a bit of fear there. We do hear from our young people that they are scared to go to the park. It's really dark at night. There's not much to actually do in the park play-wise. So we've been working with our youth council and our local park planner to, we actually managed to secure some funding to get new equipment in the park, get raised beds that the community could plant. And I think it's just accessibility for a lot of people, and maybe a bit of the fear factor. So yeah, local parks are the way to go.
I'll continue to answer this one. Sorry, my camera's not working, so you'll have to hear me and not see me. Yes, so this is something that we think about quite a bit, and what it usually comes down to for us is permission. So thinking about how we can almost grant families that permission, because I think a big barrier is again, as Danni touched on, fear, but in a different way, where there's kind of an almost a sense that they're not allowed. They don't have that permission to interact with nature, with the natural environment. And what we hear too often is that the extent to which families spend time in nature is sort of going for a walk. And that can involve kind of rushing children through and not allowing them to stop and actually kind of participate in green spaces and interact more with nature, with like literally climbing trees and things like that. So often we see parents saying, don't touch that, you don't know where that's been, or that could be poisonous, and so really it's about granting that permission. And how do we do that in the environment, especially if we're not necessarily physically present in the space. So we think about things like setting up like little libraries, and that those libraries might have, you can set up a seed library in your community space. You can set up kind of a library of nature exploration tools, so magnifying glasses, binoculars, like flora and fauna reference books, things like that families can actually come and take, and it just gives a little bit more direction as to those interactions in nature, and sort of a jumping off point for that play. And again, it's that permission. So it's saying you can interact with the nature, you can, this is safe to touch, this is safe to climb on, and things like that. And also something we do a lot is nature crafts. So working with families to explore how you can make things with things that you find. And families are often quite surprised of the extent of things that you can create just with those free resources that you just find out and about. And that's a great way to engage children playfully. And you come away feeling like you've achieved something. So that's always nice.
Thank you, Izzy. Another question that we had is how have our speakers adapted approaches for children with SEND who might experience physical barriers in the outdoors or play differently to the norm? Richard, I was wondering if you could give us a response on that.
Yeah, just from prior experience, lots of SEND schools that I've worked with have had extensive forest school programs or rural skills programs, or do lots of growing and gardening. From a nature park point of view, it's in progress. So at the minute, there's work and development on adapting our resources for SEND, but recognizing that it's a 4 letters that covers a huge spectrum of individual needs. So there's no single approach that you can apply. So what we're doing is asking teachers in schools that have registered for the nature park who are interested in that topic to test those adapted resources with their young people, and then hopefully those will launch in the next academic year, and people will be able to use them.
Thank you, Richard. Izzy, I know the School of Education at Hull University has a huge focus on SEND, so I was wondering if you'd like to add to that.
Yeah, so we do have some great expertise as part of our core team at PGP Hull in SEND and inclusivity. And what we find is that, the great thing about nature-based play is that most of our activities are quite easily adapted for a range of different abilities. We've worked quite extensively with non-verbal children, and it's great for that. Children with autism and other kinds of neurodiversity, those sensory experiences in the outdoors are fantastic. And what we actually find is that children who are experiencing like mental health difficulties are telling us that they feel so much calmer, and their well-being is so much improved when they're spending that time outdoors. And especially like I said in my presentation about the slow approach, it's just so beneficial for children of all backgrounds and abilities. It's so inclusive. As soon as you slow down and reduce your expectations of what you are there to get done and what kind of time frame you're working with, it just opens things up so much. And we find that applying an inclusive practice and that accessibility is just a lot easier in those green spaces.
Thank you, Izzy. Another question which seemed to resonate with a lot of people is around experience engaging older children and teens in this type of work, training them as leaders of these activities. I know Danny's got some experience coming through MAXwell, so I'm going to ask you to talk to that.
Sure, yes. Like I'd mentioned a little bit in my presentation, we found that young people who were in our after school clubs, they did sort of drop off when they reach high school. So we have youth volunteers, and they could join our youth council. We also have a youth cooking group for teenagers as well. My own experience, I was kind of at the right place at the right time. I found the MAXwell Centre sort of straight from university, and I started volunteering. I think the power of volunteering as well, and giving especially teenagers the opportunity to volunteer. We recently, our junior, I feel like I'm just an like advocate for the MAXwell Centre and just chatting about that. But our junior journalist recently did a video about why they volunteer, like why it's important to them. And lots of things that came up were giving back to the community, but also the importance for their CV, for the Duke of Edinburgh. I think that's such a good way to bring those young people in that are maybe a bit harder to reach. Yeah, yeah, I don't know. That's probably I think giving them a safe space is very important as well. And the MAXwell Centre kind of prides itself on that. So they know that they could come here and we could support them and give them advice, and they get something from being here too.
Amazing. Giuliana, if you could talk a little about your experience.
Yes, absolutely. In the nature park, we do have kind of specifically for the biodiversity surveys, we kind of adapt the resources for the different ages, so that there are kind of ones that work more for the younger age kids, but then the older age kids can use can do more advanced versions like counting, for example, larger number of pollinators, or getting into the nitty-gritty of the mapping, especially when it can be linked to their curriculums and their lessons, so that it can be really embedded in their whole learning. One example I have is when we went to test one of our grassland surveys with a school that happened to have a year 6 class available and a year 12. And they did the survey together. And it was just really amazing to see the younger kids really getting in there, really getting in with the grass and sort of finding all the different plants. And the older age kids, the year 12s, were supporting them in kind of guiding them through the actual survey and kind of sticking to the questions and working through all the different questions and prompting them when they were kind of getting excited and going off track. So it was a really lovely way of seeing two different age groups still doing the same survey, but bringing their different skills and experiences to it. And finally, we are developing this youth science board in the nature park, where a colleague of mine and I are going to be going to a couple of colleges, to further education colleges, where we want to be asking and discussing with young people their views on climate and nature, and how they feel about their lessons, of what they've been learning, what their concerns are, what sort of questions they have about nature and climate. And we'll be working then to find all the research and what we're doing to answer those questions, and then put it back to them. Is this answering what you wanted to know? And kind of co-developing research interests that will then inform the research direction of the whole nature park project. So a real great way to kind of include their voice in the research that we're doing.
Thank you, Giuliana. Last question, and I'm going to give this to Emma. Pre-70s children were free range within their local environment and had a wider life experience map from their doorstep. What are the innovations that need to happen to bring back a wilder child back into a local community habitat? What steps and collaborations need to be brought about to realize this ambition? I know it's a big one, just maybe some thoughts from Eden Project and the steps and collaborations that you've taken.
Yeah, great. There has been a real decline in children's opportunity to, I think a lot of speakers have touched on that kind of autonomy in these spaces, children having the ability to choose. And I think also we need to be aware of whether we are it's not just about giving children the physical freedom, which I think is really important as well, but whether we trust them as independent learners, whether we trust them to be autonomous. And a lot of, I think, these concerns come from issues around safety. So we want to have really safe places. Danni has talked about the MAXwell Centre as being this safe place that children and families know that their child is safe in. That's really important, that people feel safe in our communities. And I think when we look at the kind of, the risks, benefits, I think what our sense of where our children are unsafe is sometimes our kind of perceptions of where that risk is can be a little bit wonky. So actually, I think it'd be really important to have some real clarity about kind of, where the risks are in our communities, where the risks are in our spaces, so that we feel as parents, as practitioners, as safer to enable our children to be autonomous leaders. So autonomous, in those spaces. So I think there's two bits. We need to trust that children can self-manage and look after themselves, and we can develop the tools in them to do that. We need to know that they're safe when they're in these spaces. And then we need to know it's really important that they have those opportunities as well, I think. And then I think there's a piece around, once we've kind of worked out, what the risks are, this kind of culture where, I think sometimes we are a little bit critical when we see young people in those spaces. Actually, are we a bit judgmental of what they're doing? We did a project called It's Great Outdoors, where we sent out play boxes. This was a little bit, with younger children. And often people felt very comfortable playing in their gardens. They still didn't feel necessarily comfortable playing in public parks and spaces. And I think a lot of our young people, when they're in these spaces, kind of hanging around or just socializing with friends, we can be quite critical of what they're doing. That can, when we see a large group of people, young people on mass, we might react a little bit differently to them. And I think we need to sense check as well, where are the risks? I think we've touched a little bit on kind of recreational impact in these green spaces. And actually, is this about a lot of people doing a lot of damage, or a small minority of people doing, a lot of damage, and therefore compromising these opportunities for other people? So I think there's definitely, for me, that change in how far children can roam, and it is about safety. It is about our concerns about safety, and there are two ways. It's whether we feel that children and young people are safe in these spaces, whether we feel safe with them being in these spaces. And I think that is something that we need to look at in terms of where our kind of cultural values are, because we want to create this culture of care, this culture of safety, which enables children and young people to access these spaces. Thanks, Cathy.
Thanks so much, Emma. We are nearing the end. I've got a few reflections, which I'll share before we close, but I don't want mine to be the last voice you hear. So I'll have one final question for the panel before we close. In terms of my reflections, it's just so incredible seeing what's already happening, the things that are already possible. And how this is happening in communities and schools, and really importantly through partnerships. You've spoken a lot about the kind of intentional inclusion of children in the design of these spaces, and enabling that really to be accessible to every child in their neighborhood or in their school. I think for me, the biggest thing is around how localized these initiatives really can be. If you think about how you can bring in things like folklore, how you can bring in local illustrators, video producers, those sort of skill sets and passions, and link those to natural spaces, and really kind of build connections between adults, kids, and kids from different backgrounds or grades or levels. That for me has just been incredible to see and to hear. In terms of my final question for the panel, because we want this to be quite a practical session. So if you could just close out on, if somebody here wants to start supporting nature play in their school, their community, what's one practical thing they could do in the next month? So I think I will kick off with Giuliana, then Richard, then Danni, then Isabel, and finally Emma.
I would say start with what you've got. Literally start with what you've got. You don't need to build a whole world, just start with what it is you have. and chances are you probably have a tiny patch of lawn. And one of the easiest things you can do is to let it grow long. Take advantage of the No Mow May. It's not next month, but the one after, but just let the grass grow long and see what happens.
I would say from an HPAC or a school point of view is if you're that keen green teacher who's carrying the burden for the whole school on your shoulders, is to get some allies. And lots of teachers can sign up from one school. So I would say tell some colleagues to sign up for the HPAC and they'll receive all the same communications, and you can make it a whole school approach rather than just one person.
My advice would be just plant seeds, just go for it. I think don't be fearful. Like I said in my presentation, it doesn't always work out, but I think just go for it. Don't be scared. Don't overthink it. Just listen to your young people and get those seeds planted.
Oh, is it my turn? It's my turn. I was just waiting for Emma to go. I would say listen to the children. So get a group of the children together, create a little co-design council, give them some responsibility, and let their passion lead the way, I think.
I'm going to keep it really simple. We're going to get outdoors, we're going to notice something, and even better if we can grow something as well. Thanks, Cathy.
David, you're on mute.
Sorry, apologies, I was on mute. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Cathy, for hosting that really very expertly. Thank you, everyone, for talking. Some really amazing stuff. I'm just going to close up because I think you've heard everything that you need to hear for today. But thank you all for attending, and we will be keeping to run these Niche Towns and Cities inspiration sessions. So keep an eye on your inboxes, keep an eye on our website. There will be more sessions to come. Thank you very much.